Thank you very much. Welcome to tonight's meeting. Thank you everyone for coming. My name is Councillor Jacqueline Daly. I'm Chair of Housing and Homelessness Policy and Accountability Committee. Before we do begin properly, there are a couple of housekeeping points. We are being live streamed at this meeting on YouTube. So by participating, you're consenting to being recorded. If the fire alarm sounds, we're going to leave the building in an orderly fashion and the staff will show us out. There are some drinks, there's water on the table, there are some drinks back in the staff area, and there are toilets to my left, I believe. Can I ask officers before you speak if you would just introduce yourselves? And we have a full contingent of members, so no apologies for absence. Do members have any declarations of interest for this evening?
No.
Lovely. And can members please agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 23rd of July? Do you agree an accurate record?
Agree, yeah.
Lovely. And did everybody receive the matters arising with the agenda? The action sheet from the meeting? Okay, lovely, thank you. So we have two items on the agenda this evening. We have an item on voids that we've been looking forward to for a little while, and we have Richard Tway and John Hayden here speaking particularly to that. And our first item is a rough sleeping report. We have a number of officers here who are going to introduce themselves, and Dr. Lang, welcome. We also have from partners, Jonathan Tan from Greater Change, thank you. Peter I knew I was going to get it wrong. Would you say it for me?
It's Cheryl Ambidis.
From the upper room, thank you for coming. Welcome back, Lucy Baker, in your new role as West London Coordinator. Stuart Pradligan from St Mungo's, thank you for coming back. And Michael Angus from Barons Court, thank you for coming back. Elizabeth Odigi, thank you. Diana Ifamini from Thames Reach, and also Dan Rivers from Thames Reach. And we also have joining us remotely, Joe Carter from Glassdoor. Joe, thank you for joining us. I think the officers presenting here are Richard Shway and Claire Dorning, and Dr. Lang will be assisting. And Laura, you're going to be leading as well, aren't you? Okay, lovely. Should we push on? Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting us to talk about rough sleeping in Hammersmith and Fulham. My name's Laura Pelfman. I'm the Prevention and Rough Sleeping Commissioning Manager in Hammersmith and Fulham. And I'm with Claire Dorning, who's the Head of Homelessness. Just going to paint a little picture of what rough sleeping is like across London and the local picture. And I want to extend my thanks as well to our partners who've joined us today. Thank you very much. And we do work together.
Sorry, I think we've got a bit. I'm not sharing my screen. My screen isn't sharing. Yeah.
So, is that your presentation?
Yeah.
All
Got
right,
it sharing here, but not on the screen.
right, so whose presentation is this? then?
It is
This
this,
is
but it's
our
not.
presentation,
Right, okay.
and I've got it up on Zoom. Sorry. Yeah. It's sharing. In fact, we turn it on the side.
Zoom in.
Yeah, there's Zoom. And then
But
I had to go to Windows.
let's try to see what.
Mhm.
You might be got a lot of
Then we go Windows.
got a lot of stuff open.
Position of where I sit.
So
And
which
then
one
you
is
go
it?
to,
So is it that one that you want
Yeah.
to share?
okay, there we go, thank you.
And
But I wanted to go to the slideshow.
so let's just
You that's all that one.
do that.
Is it launched this time? No, you
It's not
see,
doing it on there, but at least we can.
I don't know.
Sorry,
So
getting the technical
go
assist.
go that way and that way.
Yeah,
So
but it's not connected.
anyway that we can close down some of these.
Yeah.
Chair, I was just going to say, as we still live streaming, and also we got partners here, would you be okay for Laura to start the presentation? I think that would be probably a good thing if we did.
That's a good idea. The reports have been published online anyway, so the presentation was the cherry on top. Would you mind going to just talking us through the report, Laura? Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, so just rough sleeping is increasing across London and in fact nationwide. In London, that has been a 58% increase in the last 10 years. And we have got sort of some graphics as well, just showing that the first 2 quarters of this year, those numbers are continuing to increase across London, and those by outreach teams across the capital, and they're recorded on chain. Locally, in 2023-24, Hammersmith and Fulham did record the highest increase in rough sleeping in London, but we've still not got the highest numbers. There's no sort of one clear cause for that increase, although there was an increase in Home Office decisions, increasing sort of the number of accommodation ending in asylum support accommodation. And relationship breakdown also tends to be another key reason for homelessness. We have seen that trend of rough sleeping numbers increasing for the beginning of the year, but we are thankfully seeing those numbers reducing over the last 3 months, which is really helpful as we are approaching winter and the potential for that severe weather and increased risk to people who are rough sleeping. We have a sort of very clear rough sleeper pathway for people who are found. We've got outreach who are here today, and we'll respond to street link referrals, which members of the public can alert us to if they find someone who is rough sleeping. Those alerts are passed to something called rapid response team, and that is a pan-London service. And they work closely with outreach teams, our local outreach teams, then also respond to individual alerts if they're not been able to find an individual, and they will filter those referrals and make targeted searches of the borough, as well as looking around key hotspots that they're familiar with where they know people might be rough sleeping. And the outreach team will sort of complete a quick assessment, working with compassion with those individuals, checking if they've got eligibility or what their support needs might be, to see if there was any immediate off the street bed spaces that they can refer people to. That could be something like No Second Night Out, which is Pan London service, or Somewhere Safe to Stay, our rough sleeping assessment hub. So if there is accommodation available and they're able to complete those initial checks, they can put people straight into accommodation that night. They will also complete needs assessment involving work with a range of partners, such as mental health services, our drug and alcohol support, substance misuse services, local enforcement teams, and we have a RAMP, which is a rough sleep and mental health partnership that can go out and if there's got someone that they're particularly concerned about that's not engaging, they can have those joint assessments with individuals to try and get the right pathway for that individual so we can get the right outcomes for them. Then once people are sort of in an accommodation, or if they're on a waiting list to get into accommodation, we're looking at those move on options again in partnership to see what we could potentially do and where they might be the best way for them to get to a more sustained accommodation outcome, which could be in a sort of local services, or it could potentially be a resettlement and reconnection if they've got accommodations or options and other local authorities. Go back up, yeah. So just wanted to highlight a number of the successful accommodation outcomes that we've achieved over the start of this financial year from April. Outreach team have managed, in those accommodations that I've talked about, managed 60 placements from the street so far, and continue to work with services and individuals to get people in as soon as this option's available. The Glassdoor night shelters, and we've got Glassdoor here today, opened last week and are open to referrals from partners. So the team are working closely to make sure we can get those referrals in to Glassdoor. We've also been successful with Bridges, which is a Pan London service, again, support, providing private rented sector accommodation and support for people who have former asylum seekers. And we've also been successful using a sort of Pan London Women's Hub. So when they've got capacity and services built through those partnership working, we will try and get individuals into those services. We have supported accommodation in the borough, managed by St Mungo's, and that provides often a move on from the initial off the street accommodation, where support is provided by staff on site. We've got a range of high, medium support services. There's a lot of in-reach services and support that goes into that accommodation. And they're working with them to provide them with the skills and ability to manage independent living. And we had 24 people move away from their supported accommodation so far in these first 2 quarters. We have a range of move-on options as well from those accommodations, such as supporting people quota, move on into private rented accommodation, and occasionally care settings if that's the most appropriate service for that individual. Just to expand on the services that we do have, which are going in, and many of which are here today, we have, over the last 3 years, expanded our Housing First provision. Housing First is often considered one of the best ways of having sustained accommodation outcomes for those who have, especially with the high needs or history of entrenched or repeat homelessness. We have in-reach support, as I've mentioned, into the supported accommodation to try and prevent that repeat homelessness and support people with their needs that are not just accommodation based. So we have a domestic abuse navigator, for example. There's nursing services that go in. Substance misuse turning point also provides some in-reach support services. And they're developing, just developed a tenancy sustainment course to put the residents through as well, all looking at that long-term support to prevent the cycle of homelessness.
Shall we, so it's amongst our partners here this evening, I really apologise for the technology. We're even having another go at the end of the row here. But Thames Reach, so you're out on the streets every evening, every night, helping us to identify rough sleepers. And I think you know, I mean, it'd be really helpful to, you know, be useful to hear a little bit from you about that service. And you're also providing the support for our Housing First. So we've got 2 services sort of being delivered by Thames Reach. And how many residents are you supporting with Housing First?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. So we have a capacity for 31 tenancies at the moment, but we are working with about half of that at the moment because of various reasons. Some of our clients are still in supported accommodation. We are looking to allocate them into a permanent flat, and some are already in their tenancies and they are sustaining their tenancies with our support. Dan is here with me, and he mainly supports and works with the outreach team. And we do have a whole team approach service, which means that our service users can be supported when they need to. They don't need to wait for an allocated worker to look at their case.
Yeah, I think it'd be useful as we've got our partners here today, just for everyone to introduce themselves and a little bit about the services that you provide to our residents and to help prevent rough sleeping. So we'll go next to Elizabeth.
Thank you, Laura. So I'm Liz O'Deege, I'm from Turning Point, and in relation to the support that we provide, we are based within different settings across Hammersmith and Fulham, including the St Mungo's hostels. We work closely with all of the partners, pretty much all the partners here, doing joint outreach with the Thames Reach team on a weekly basis. Working collaboratively with our community safety colleagues, including street action and outreach with the law enforcement team, also providing professional training to different teams to raise awareness around substance use, but also more specifically enhance pathways into treatment and ensure that as professionals working across the borough, they are able to recognise the signs and the risks associated with substance use. In relation to the work that we do across the borough, we also work closely with a lived experience approach, ensuring that our peer mentors have a key role to play as part of engaging people into treatment and support, but also ensuring that they're able to really support people through the treatment journey, because it's an ongoing thing in terms of recovery support. So we have to ensure that that lived experience approach is visible through from the start of treatment through to the end. We have different services located in different areas to ensure that we take the services to people. So even when people aren't engaging in a sustainable way, we're able to see them at their GP surgeries, we're able to see them in lots of different ways. And we also have specialist workers across the team. So we have a social worker based within our team. We have a psychologist and also mental health wellbeing practitioners within the service. And we try to ensure that we tailor the support accordingly, just based on the co-occurring needs that some of our clients may present with. So it's really quite a multifaceted approach in terms of how we work, but also it's a multi-agency approach as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael.
Hi everyone, so my name is Michael Angus and I'm Director at Barron's Court Project, which is Hammersmith and Fulham's only day centre for people who are on the streets, homeless, people at risk of homelessness, and also people living with mental health conditions. I've been there 10 years now, and just to kind of give you the scale of change, 10 years ago when I came to BCP, we'd see around 250 to 300 individuals a year with about 7,000 attendances. Last year we served over 900 individuals at the centre, more remotely, and we had 14,000 visits. So that has been a journey that has just gone up. And the change in demographics, so 10 years ago it was 70% mental health, 30% of sleeping, it's now 95% rough sleeping and 5% mental health. And I do worry about where the people with mental health have gone, because they haven't gone away. They're just not coming because we're full, often day by day, and having sometimes to turn people away. In terms of what we do, I split our work into 3 areas and call it body, mind, spirit. We're very holistic in our approach. So body services are the things people ask for first: a shower, a hot meal, clothing, basics that we all need to live, as well as kind of then health services. We have visiting nurses once a week, dentistry once a month, opticians once every quarter. We're trying to get podiatry back, and guests doing haircuts for one another with clippers. Not, they don't do mine, I do my own, but with a razor. So that's the kind of body services. Then the mind stuff is anything that's about helping people who may need a little bit of help to fill out forms. So that's lots of benefits forms, housing applications, referrals to our partner Glassdoor now, and other things that people just may not have the ability to do by themselves, or lots of CV writing and job searching and so on. And then the other bit is what we call spirit, and that's the bit about enabling people to live the life they deserve. So our arts program, music, trips to theatres, beach in the summer, it was a cloudy day, but anyway, and various different activities that allow people just to live. And we're very conscious that people who are rough sleeping often live much reduced lives. And so it's about enabling people to breathe. And whilst I'm here, I am going to do a plug. So for those of you who don't know, we have a social enterprise called homelessmade.co.uk. Check it out. Amazing cards done by the guests, sold to raise money for the artists and also for the Barron's Court project. And we've sold about 35,000 cards since we launched in COVID. So have a look.
Well done, thank you. Stuart.
Hi, I'm Stuart Proudley. I'm Senior Service Manager with St Mungo's. We run the support accommodation pathway for homelessness in Hammersmith and Fulham. That comprises of 7 projects which have support 129 people on any given night. For the people who live in those services, each of them has a named lead worker who helps work with them to sort of coordinate a bespoke plan of support to help them in their recovery. That'll include working with teams like Turning Point, who come into the services to provide support directly to the clients who live there. Also with NHS nursing teams who will come in as well to meet sort of health needs, often the only people they'll be meeting in terms of their health needs at the point where they come in and start living with us. So there's such an important link to other health services as well. We also work alongside adult social care who'll come into services as well. And that's been a more recent change where we've had lead social worker coming in. And we've really noticed a huge difference in the ability to work with our clients in a trauma-informed way and allow them to access the sort of care that they need, whether that's some of our clients in their later years are actually then accessing extra care or specialist support for people with substance use, but also high levels of sort of care and support needs, but also just care packages as well to allow them to live with a better quality of life in their own homes as well. So through that process, we try and build on a person's recovery using their strengths and move them through either through the pathway to lower support, so they're going to sort of semi-independent training flats, or sometimes directly out into their own accommodation. Other people will leave into residential rehab as well for substance use. Sort of range of areas that people just move on to. Other people are sort of moved back in with family or partners. And through that process also, they will link in with people like our education and learning advisors and progression coaches to help them link back in with learning, activities and things, meaningful uses of their time, which they can link back on often with things they used to enjoy doing, but maybe have not been doing for a long time. We've also now got an employment specialist working with us as well. So they're linking in directly to get people back into paid work, but they work with people on a longer term, sort of over a year, to help people get ready for work, get into work, and then help them sustain that work as well. So we know that our clients have a complex range of support needs and have often got a lack of confidence as well, where they've been out of work or out of learning for a long period of time.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Lucy Baker. I'm the West London Homelessness and Rough Sleeping Coordinator. I did previously work at Hammersmith and Fulham Council for many years, and then in April this year, I moved into my new role, which is hosted by RBKC, but works with all 7 West London boroughs. So I'm involved in a number of different projects and pieces of work around both statutory and rough sleeping, and the rough sleeping world, really. In terms of rough sleeping, we've been able to benefit from additional funding through the Rough Sleeping Initiative grant through central government, which has meant that we've been able to commission services on a sub-regional basis, which has been to the benefit of all West London boroughs. So that's brought in additional funding and capacity on top of what individual boroughs have been able to do locally. That has enabled us to obviously support more rough sleepers to come into services, but also make sure that boroughs are working better together, in particular where there might be opportunities for shared services, shared learning, and joint commissioning as well. So yeah, that's it so far.
Hi, yeah, I'm Peter Charalambidis. I have to sort of confess, this is my first day as CEO of the Upper Room, so I'll probably keep this quite brief if you don't mind. The Upper Room, we offer 3 main services. The first one is You Are for Meals, which is a hot food service which runs 5 days a week. We currently feed around 100 people a night, and at that, people can get clothes, toiletries, sleeping bags, and things like that. We also have a You Are for Jobs, which is an employability and wellbeing service, which everyone probably at this table can attest that it's not usually just trying to find someone a job. People come to us with a myriad of needs and challenges, and yeah, so we often have to deal with the root causes rather than just trying to find someone a job. So maybe it's mental health or substance abuse or something similar. And then the final one is, which is quite unique, which is You Are for Driving, where we offer driving lessons and theory tests for people who have had some interaction with the criminal justice service and people under 25, which has been really positive. And I have to say, everything I've seen so far has been, yeah, really impressive. So I'm quite proud of the work that Ian's done up until this point. So hopefully I'll be able to continue it.
Thanks. Hi. So my name's Jonathan Tan. I'm the CEO of Creative Change, and we don't actually currently work in Hammersmith, Fulham yet. Very grateful for the invite to meet other people, the officers, the members, and other service providers. But essentially what we do is we provide personalized budgets to people experiencing homelessness to help them unlock large steps on the pathway out. So I don't think I need to explain to anyone here that, very often, no matter how well you're engaging with your support worker, how hard you're working, you quite inevitably come up against some financial barriers you can't overcome by yourself. And that's sort of where we step in. We get the referrals from frontline partners. We make a very deliberate choice to not duplicate existing support work, but to instead work with services that we trust. We get referrals from the support worker. It's a simple 10 to 15-minute online form. And in that triangle of the client, the support worker, and ourselves, we offer some financial planning support, quantify how much it's going to cost to overcome these barriers. And what we say is we'll fund anything under the sun, right? Because the idea is to really respect the individual ambitions and to be really, really flexible. Because very often it's just the idea that between the support worker and the client, very often you do know what you need. You can make good decisions. And really what we do is we just want to offer the financial resources to help you overcome those barriers. So that's what we do. As I said, here to meet everyone. I'm very, very glad to be here. And yeah, looking forward to speaking more and learning more about the lay of the land. Yeah.
Laura, can I just say, Jonathan, just to be clear, you have met with officers, you've talked about the provision, and now you're at the point of going out for fund, you're raising funds to be able to provide the service in the borough. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's right. So you met with Stefan and James, and one of our managers and team leaders, and sort of talked about the sorts of services that would be and our gaps in provision, and sort of very helpfully trying to match your offer with how we may be able to work sort of going forward, and hopefully with the support we've been able to provide you, and with this kind of sense of sort of direction and travel, that will support an application for funding.
Yes, I was going to say, and Joe. Hi.
Hi, can everyone hear me? Yeah. So hi, I'm Jo. I'm the CEO at Glassdoor. We have been working in Hammersmith and Fulham since we began, which we actually have been around for 25 years next year. I guess in simple terms, we offer two sort of main types of service. We offer year-round casework service in 3 boroughs in West London, including Hammersmith and Fulham, and we have a caseworker based in the upper room. Really nice to meet you, Peter, albeit virtually. We also offer emergency accommodation. Our emergency accommodation opened last Monday and will remain open until April. We operate 3 circuits. That's 3 circuits, each with 7 venues. One of those circuits is in Hammersmith and Fulham. And in Hammersmith and Fulham, we will offer 35 spaces every night between now and April. It just so happens that our Hammersmith and Fulham circuit is our women's circuit. We introduced a women's circuit last winter in direct response to the growing number of women experiencing homelessness. So this winter, as last winter, we'll have a women's circuit, a men's circuit and a mixed circuit. So as I say, that opened last week. The absolute vital element of our emergency shelter is that it is very much supported by our casework service. So all of our shelter guests have access to a caseworker. And even though we're only sort of 1 week into the service, a really significant number of our shelter guests have already met with a caseworker. And our absolute aim is to ensure that those that are staying in our shelters, we do work with them to find a pathway out of homelessness. That's absolutely key to the service. Yeah, I think that's probably it for now. There's a lot I could talk for a long, long time about everything we do, but I think that's in a nutshell what we do.
That's great. Thank you, Jo. And I think what is clear from what we've just heard from all of our partners here is that there is a lot of work going on and there's still more work to be done. We also work very closely with our Director of Public Health, Nikki Lang, who's here today, and our adult social care colleagues and other internal colleagues also. I won't go on for too much longer because I'm sure there's questions that you want to be asking us, but we just wanted to provide a couple of brief examples of show that some of that great partnership work that we have been going on when we're thinking about helping people off from rough sleeping. So the first example we'll call Mary, not using the real names, who had a dual diagnosis of mental health and substance misuse, and they had been rough sleeping for a long period and had physical health needs as well, which were debilitating to her. The multi-agency approach was needed to coordinate the best way to support them, who were initially not engaging. So bringing together a range of partners to support this individual into a hospital admission where they've been able to access the support that they need and get them away from the street. And our second example is Joseph, which is he was an entrenched rough sleeper who had been refusing again to engage with services. They were supported into accommodation during SWEP, which is the severe weather emergency protocol, which can be called into place if there's is severe weather over winter. And that's often a really good way to get people who have not been engaging with services into accommodation and start working and building that trust and partnership with them. So they did come in during a SWEP accommodation, and they managed to use that time to work with the Home Office, establish eligibility, and then long-term housing solutions from there. So there is no one sort of glove fits all, or no one solution. Looking at bespoke solutions and options with everyone to develop the best options for people. And as we've already covered all this sort of partnership work, I won't go on to that. Just a brief thing I wanted to talk about was some of the challenges. So there is a lot of great work that is going on. SWEP is a challenge that comes over this periods of severe weather. There's no specific funding from the central government for that, although as Lucy has mentioned, we have been given some winter pressure funds through the sub-regional work, which is fantastic. We have got grant funds from the GLA and Ministry of Housing, which were a 3-year programme. One of them was the Rough Sleeper Initiative, known as RSI, which is ending in March 25. And similarly was a GLA grant, which is known as RSAP, which Rough Sleeping Assessment Programme, I think, accommodation programme. There's lots of acronyms. And again, that funding is also due to expire in March 2025. We just had the budget last month, so we're waiting to hear what the potential, what that might mean, what the new future funding outcomes might be, to see what we can do going forward. And as we have already mentioned, the rising number of incidences of rough sleeping is adding pressure to limited resources. Part of the accommodation challenges is sort of a lack of investment, some disinvestment from some housing associations who perhaps wanting to move away from the sector and selling properties, risking some of the accommodation that we have. But we were lucky to acquire some money, which Lucy did in the predecessor role, from the GLA, again, to help purchase one of the supported housing properties, which was at risk. And that's great news for us, to make sure we can secure that property for the long-term use of rough sleeping. Another issue is just generally affordability of accommodation, especially for under 35s, where they're subject to quite tight local housing allowance limits. So part of the work is about helping maximise income for individuals so that they can have more opportunities. And at that point, I will sit down and offer the opportunity to ask any questions.
Thank you very much, Laura, and thank you for everybody who spoke there. I'm going to ask members for questions, but could I ask a question first off? I would like to understand a little bit more about the number of people in beds and needing beds. In your report, you talk about there being an annual count, which is going to happen at the end of this month, I understand. Last year, I think you said that we counted 14 individuals and 7 the year before, but we're talking about a lot more beds here. Glassdoor, we're talking about having 35 beds. And I would like to understand a little bit more about that snapshot. Does that do a snapshot of everybody who is rough sleeping and happens to be in? And then the second part of my question is, it's not that easy. During SWEP, in the summer or in the winter, it's everybody in. At the beginning of COVID, it was a SWEP, it was everybody in. At that point, the beds found across London for all of those people. We've kind of heard from Thames Reach that they look to see if there are beds available for people. Clearly, there aren't always. And I would like to understand where the additional beds come from and how many people are sort of missed out every night. Thank you.
Thank you. So if I understand, the first question was around sort of the snapshot. So what you have monthly figures where you might be looking at how many people are seen over that month. But the single night snapshot, which happens on the annual count, is coordinated across other London boroughs as well, to try to make sure that we're not double counting. So obviously some people might be moving from there's no borough boundaries, you know, so it's an effort by sort of the Ministry of Housing to try and get a good understanding of what the actual numbers of rough sleeping are. So that will be how many people actually found bedded down or about to bed down on that particular night. And then those numbers are reported to the Ministry of Housing. And with SWEP, we have the In for Good ethos, which is aimed at, you know, once they're in, once that cold period is over and that SWEP emergency protocol has ended, it's usually for 1, maybe 3, 4 nights, depending on how extreme the weather is at that period. We don't then just put everyone back onto the street. We're looking at making those sort of longer term housing options and solutions. And often it is the best way to get some people engaged with the housing options. That might come from looking at the existing stock, what we have available. Could be some temporary accommodation is used for that period. while we look at the longer term housing options.
Thank you. So 14 last year was the total number of people in this borough who were needing a bed for that night. Is that what I'm to understand?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you.
Because it's a snapshot, you know, that the rough sleeping count is the annual count that, and we go out with our partners onto the streets. We cover as much ground as we can using all our local intelligence in terms of rough sleeping, you know, where we know rough sleepers to bed down. But at the end of the day, I mean, it's, you know, it's not it's not perfect. It is a snapshot of rough sleeping on that night. I suppose one of the powers of it is because it's coordinated, you get that feel for rough sleeping at a point in time across London, and I think that's quite a helpful picture to get once a year. But it is, in a sense, what it is. It is that count that night, with using our best intelligence.
And that includes everybody staying with Glassdoor in the borough.
No, it will be
So
people that
that's-
are on the street.
So that's the number of people that we haven't found places for.
Yeah, that are not accommodated. Yeah, absolutely right.
And Thames Reach, does that sound about right? So last year there was maybe 14 people. And what would you say the number would be about now? We find out in 2 weeks, so we can see how good you are.
I think it's also just so variable. Like heavy rain can cause people to maybe sofa surf for the night or call in a favor. As you know, people will be in Glassdoor, but they may be kicked out the next night. So it's so variable. I wouldn't be able to give you an exact figure. I'd say probably maybe 5 more this year, but it'd be so variable on the night. And there's so many different, sometimes people will walk across the borough boundary. So we have a number of clients who sleep in K&C, come here, go back to K&C. So on that night, 10 of them might be in K&C rather than here. And that might change our amount significantly, to give an idea.
Thank you. Richard.
Chair, if you don't mind, so I'm Richard Schwer, Director of Housing. You asked about COVID. So Nikki and I were working during COVID, and when we got the phone call from government to see how we can help the homelessness in the sense of putting them into accommodation, it was a lot easier because we didn't have any guests in our hotels, so we were able to actually do that very quickly and manage that very well, and we did that within roughly 48 hours. We did that, all of us did that, and we're working quite long hours, long days to get that all sorted out. But as I was speaking to Peter, one thing, because I was staying, as part of my job, I had to stay in the borough and keep my family safe, so I was staying in a hotel accommodation as well. One of the things which we didn't understand was about the knock-on effect of putting people who've been rough sleeping for many, many years into accommodation. And what we found out was that it was tough for them because they were in a box which they haven't been used to, they haven't been used to seeing, and not being able to use a bed and things of that nature. And when we were speaking to the maids who were trying to sort things out for the hotel accommodation, they were having difficulty understanding why people were sleeping on the floor and things of that nature. And that's something which Nikki and I, went to help and support people to see and help them to understand what the accommodation was going to be, because we didn't know at that time how long they were going to stay there, and help them in that transition. And I think that's another thing which we tend to forget. It's not just about putting people into accommodation, it's all the other things which all providers have to help, and you all provide a really great service. And from the bottom of my heart, thank you for helping us to do that. But it's really hard, isn't it, when people have been in that situation and putting them into another situation, and it's trying to change their philosophy about why we want to help them as well. Sorry, Chair, I hope that was okay to speak about that.
Well, thank you. That was really useful. Thank you very much. Diana.
Yeah, sorry, to add to that, we definitely are more mental health minded, all of us, because we understand that rough sleeping in any situation for whichever person comes with the traumas involved that. And we've experienced, surely in supported accommodation, people, as Richard said, that they are not able to sleep in a bed because they've been used to sleeping on a floor, you know. And it, you know, since COVID, it was really difficult. And it was also as well an opportunity for clients who thought they had no legal standing in UK, and they were able to see solicitors. Someone was able to see their cases as well. That was really helpful then and there. And now we're working in a situation where we are working with the opposite of that, which is our numbers are rising up because we are seeing more people living home office accommodation at this moment. And we are seeing as well more young people who are more difficult to house as well, because we are not able to, you know, their entitlement to 1-bedroom rate is lower than a 35-year-old. So we are seeing people who are even studying and they are not able to afford anywhere to live.
Thank you. So the actual shape of homelessness has changed quite a lot in the last few years. Thank you very much. Members? Yeah, Jen? Authors, thank you.
Selection of questions. So they will sound rather dotted, but they do have the relationship. I notice that it's terribly tragic when people become rough sleepers. What I'm concerned about is the number of what I call returners. If you have managed to help what I call the first timers and hopefully move them on, how many of them come back to you? Do you find it's I hate to use the word, a revolving door? And if so, is it because of mental health, or is it the fact they are not happy to be, shall we say, in a not a set form of accommodation? And how do you manage to deal with people who, for whatever reason, seem to be become a revolving door? And the other thing is, on a sort of heartfelt thing, what happens, because quite a few rough sleepers I see have animals with them. What do you do with the animals? Do you accommodate them? How do you deal with them? What is the provision for them? Because for some people, it's an absolute lifeline for them. So what do you do about it? And then I'll have a couple more questions after that.
Thank you, Stuart.
I mean, jump in on pets and things. Some of our services do allow animals. We know that some people, it's a barrier to come off the street if they'd have to leave their dog. That's recognised. So we don't want that to be a barrier. So where people have dogs, there are hostels where they can bring that dog in. And we have partners as well who we link in with to provide support to those animals as well. So some really good services. If one of our residents went to, say, residential rehab, there are services which can actually look after the dog, provide really good care for it in the interim as well. So we try and make sure that's not a barrier to people coming in.
Thank you.
And I don't know if you'd like to add on to that in terms of the street vets.
Yeah. So we work with a number of services such as dogs on the street and street vets as well to provide care for the dogs whilst they're out. As Stuart said, his accommodation and also our rough sleeping assessment hub all accept pets now. So we do have routes off the streets for people with animals. Obviously, occasionally, if they've got large amounts, we may use a fostering service whilst we source them longer term accommodation, house and first flats, also a route off the streets for them as we allow dogs in those. I think that's on our end, that's sort of all the work we do. And we do definitely provide holistic. So for an example, recently we had a client who had dog got pregnant whilst on the streets. We liaised with street vets to make sure they gave birth safely. We then got the puppies vaccinated and managed to help find adoption for all of them. And so the client only has a reasonable amount of dogs now, not 10, which he did initially.
I hope you had the dog neutered as well at the same time.
Yeah, that's a part.
Thank you. Michael?
I think in terms of the first question was about returners, and I have to say we don't see that many, which is a really good thing. We don't want to see people coming back and needing our service. I can think of a few, and some of those have had jobs that have been kind of live-in jobs, seasonal jobs, mainly picking vegetables or other things, and then have lost, they've come to an end. There are a few over the 10 years that I've seen who've come back and sadly have, not managed to hold their accommodation or their work and so on. We're there for them. We don't have any restrictions on say you can't come back. You've gone through a process once. We welcome them back, but we hope we don't see them back. In terms of dogs, we've had dogs at Barons Court Project. We've got a beautiful new dog bowl because they had a margarine tub, and I thought, no, that's not how we do things at BCB. So I went on Amazon, we've got a purple dog bowl with a paw print and a bone on it. So when Sue Fenimore, former councillor, brings her dog to board meetings, he's got the bowl, and Curly used it in the summer, who was a guest for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this is recorded on chain as well if a person's new or if they're returning to rough sleeping. What we don't see is a large number of people returning due to sort of evictions from accommodation or for rent arrears. So there is support. So often so something like Housing First, for example, they have quite long-term support from there. It's not time specific. They can keep that support for as long as needed. And often they will come back if they've had a relationship or they've been in supported accommodation. They can sometimes just pop in. We've also got sort of floating support services that can go and support people in their tenancies to help them maintain that. Yeah, it'd be great to know particularly why some of those are. We have had some issues perhaps with cuckooing being a concern and people sort of abandoning or giving up their accommodation.
Thank you. Councillor Siddique.
Thank you very much. First of all, I want to say everyone's thank you for the great job you are doing, and it must be appreciated. We really appreciate for your great work for the community you are doing and coming today here as well and explaining us. Is it just a question? Is not like tough question. This is simply like Diana said. We have a number of people coming from due to affected by the Home Office. And do you have any track record, or they are like students, or they are which ethnicity they are, or they are asylum seekers, or they have families, or they are, for example, just due to they have no leave to remain, and how you support them to get the the legal support and our the center, or you're referring them back to the hub, and how they is voted or not is the. I'll go for the second part.
Councillor Siddique, can I ask Claire Dorling to answer that first, please?
I think that if we can sort of step in there, we do have numbers around our the rough sleepers that have come from NAT accommodation, as we call Home Office accommodation, and we can. I don't think we have provided. We haven't provided from the ethnic the ethnic breakdown, but that is information.
We have got that information on chain. So we know that it's the rest of the world is kind of what they tends to come in as necessarily, rather than individual countries where they're coming from. But often what it is in terms of the decisions is they've been asylum seeking, so they haven't had that recourse or that ability to work or study, so they literally get their sort of positive outcome decision, and they get given a short amount of time where they have to leave the current accommodation, and that's where some of the challenges come from, because it is only a very short time to help them get job or benefits or access. If they have mental health support needs, make sure they've got the right services, make sure they've got ESA or PIP. So it's a short period of time we have to work with the individuals.
And where we have a rough sleeper that isn't eligible, so doesn't have the leave to remain in the country, then that work will be very much around connecting them with specialist legal advice. And we have specialist services that we have referral arrangements with to help them get their status regularised.
And just to add, when things like SWEP come in, or I think Joe, you'll confirm it. There's no eligibility in terms of recourse to public funds. It's everyone in. So those elements then help open doors and opportunities that wouldn't necessarily be there otherwise.
According to a rough estimate at the moment, more than 2 million people have no leave to remain in the country at the moment, and they're suffering from these issues. And do we have any track record then how many families coming in LBHF borough, or they are coming back, or they get the, legal support and the figure estimate at the moment in the country.
Chair, if I can come in, as you know, Councillor, we've got a very good, successful programme of what we undertake with our refugee programme. And actually, the reason why the refugee programme is now part of Claire's services management is to actually look at it as one whole aspect of service delivery. So we are looking at those things. We work with the Home Office. We also work with the refugee community to ensure that we actually find opportunities, and we also are making sure that we actually deliver what we need to deliver on behalf of the council and also on behalf of the Home Office. So hopefully I've answered that question.
Thank you for your clarification. I'll rephrase the question, because I understand if they don't have no leave to remain, they're, like Claire said, they don't have eligibility. So we rehouse them and give them the whole, access to the justice, solicitors and food, accommodation, how long we can continue this. Otherwise, if not, on some point with.
So where somebody is not eligible and does not have leave to remain, regardless of whether or not they're a single person, rough sleeping, or a family, the council cannot directly assist them with housing because they are not eligible to receive public services. But we have other partners. But what we then do is we make referrals into children's services and adult social care, who then carry out assessment under other legislation like the Care Act and the National Assistance Act and things. So there are other services that may kick in, but it's not the homelessness service that would kick in. And while asylum seekers are accommodated in NAS accommodation, they are the responsibility of the Home Office, and Home Office staff are on site to support them. It's the point at which they become eligible or they've received a negative decision that they may then approach the council for assistance.
Thank you, Richard.
Yeah, I was just going to. The Home Office is where we work very closely with our Home Office colleagues, and the Home Office will then also be making sure that they will be supporting those individuals.
Correctly, the number we have given, the people who don't have leave to remain are not included in this number. So means they're not eligible. Is that correct?
The numbers that you have in front of you this evening relate specifically to rough sleepers. It's not. This is not about our broader homelessness population, and it's not specifically about sort of people who are accommodated, having sort of come, claiming refuge and asylum in the country. The information tonight is very focused on rough sleeping, and so so what you have is information about rough sleepers, where we have identified and picked up a rough sleeper with our partners, and where they have shared with us that their reason for rough sleeping is coming out of Home Office accommodation. But that is only where that information has been shared with us.
We do also have 4 beds in our rough sleeper assessment hub, which are eligible for single persons with no recourse to public funds. If they're currently going through or having support, if they've had if we think that they might be a way for them to move on. So whilst they're getting that support, whilst they're engaging with the Home Office, so that we can then obviously return those beds to use when that person has got their eligibility and moves on.
Just the last bit, sorry, Chair. The figure shows when the people and leave to remain, Home Office no anymore supporting them. Obviously, they become homeless, or they do have litigation cases going on at different courts, and they do not have any resources because they can't get the accommodation under the new law 2012. They can't get any rent accommodation, and they can't work as well. They can't get the GP. So this type of support you're helping, thank you very much, is amazing. But in this situation, where the council, how we can help them? That's my question. If it's clear enough.
So Chair, we do help them. That's why we have a refugee programme, and that's what we undertake. We also work with our colleagues in the Home Office where that is their responsibility for the Home Office to undertake. So we do have a cohort of refugee programmes and activities which we've undertaken. In that refugee programmes which we undertake, they do get services from the NHS, and I'll just bring in Dr. Lang.
Yeah, just everyone is eligible to register with a GP regardless of whether they're no request to public funds. That's absolutely fine. There's a lot of misconceptions about that. And they can also access secondary care, so hospital care, if it's urgent or emergency or cancer treatment. Yeah, they're able to do that.
Have to pay the bill for that according to the legal legislations. And if their leave to remain is finished, if they're going to the hospital and just sending them the bills.
I think there are some misconceptions. There are no bills for primary care. So all of primary care, so GP practices is completely free. Pharmacy care is also free. If there's urgent hospital care, then they wouldn't be sent a bill. It's only, I think you're thinking of particular cases in which people didn't have urgent care, then they get billed, but that would be rare. I think there's been a lot of work in the London NHS system, which I did in my previous job, to dispel the myths around that. They don't need to chase people for cancer bills and things like that, because cancer counts as urgent.
Thank you, Dr.
Thank
Lang.
you.
Sorry, Councillor Sadiq, can I ask third sector partners, how much work do you do with people who have been assigned as having no recourse to public funds? Is that kind of a big area for you? Michael, you're nodding.
So for us, because we're not an accommodation provider, that's a huge area, because obviously for those that are providing accommodation, you gather rents and that pays for your services. And that's where we saw a huge increase last year in numbers following the government's decision to grant refugee status to 50,000 people, but give them as little as 2 days notice to vacate a hotel onto the streets. And we were seeing 5 to 8 new people every single day from mid-September onwards. And at one point I'd gone to my board and said by middle of October, we can't do this. We either have to go back to what we were doing in COVID and allocating people a slot of 2 hours to come in from the cold and telling them you'll have a shower once a week if you're lucky, and maybe, you know, we'll make sure you get fed each day, but that's about as much as we can do. Fortunately, what we saw was that people managed to move on somewhere, we don't know where for most of them, within about a 4-week, 6-week period. So we were seeing a throughput, which meant we were able, some days we probably had too many people in the building, but we were able to get people through and to be able to manage the service. And then we started working very closely. I think I spoke to you, Lucy, about it. And we've worked very closely with the asylum seeker team. So we have been working with Tracy McCormack and Adam Ali, who are very lovely, and so that we're getting stuff to people in the hotels, so they're not having to come through the centre.
Thank you very much. Dan.
So our team also works largely with NRPF cohort, and also just to clarify, there is a large NRPF cohort outside of asylum seekers, as I know this is very focused on that right now. But there's visa overstayers, student visas who no longer attending courses. That also makes up quite a large cohort of our rough sleeping population. We currently have a number of modern slavery cases on our caseload who are also rough sleeping with no recourse. As a team, we use pan-London projects more than local, if the NRPF, as the GLA does provide a wider funding for it. So something like MAPS, which is the Migrant Action Project, which aims to reconnect people to their home countries if safe. If not, and it's an extremely complex immigration case, they can provide accommodation while casework is done. But that's sort of our cohort of rough sleep and NRPF.
Sorry, if I can share, what sort of number do you observe or you can quote every month approximately? That's what.
It's hard to say, maybe 4 to 5 currently. I would say luckily our borough doesn't have a large NRPF cohort compared to some other West London boroughs, which is quite good for us.
Thank you.
Lucy, do you have anything to add?
Just to add, obviously there are some, as Dan has touched on, some pan-London commission services to provide people with access to appropriate immigration and legal advice. And there's also a programme called SIAS as well, which is commissioned sub-regionally, where we work with the law centres in each area to make sure that people are duly considered if they wish to engage with that process. So there is lots of work going on underneath that as well. And of course, as Laura has said, in an emergency situation, whether that be COVID or severe weather, then those rules are not applied because that's about saving lives in that particular circumstance. So there are other services commissioned both sub-regionally and across London to direct people into making sure that they've seen a proper immigration advisor and may be able to regularise their case. But yes, it is difficult, obviously, with people with no recourse outside of an emergency situation in terms of what they can access. And as Dan has said, across West London, there are some boroughs with particularly large groups of people that have no recourse, that have built up over a number of years. And there, of course, great work done by faith and community sectors to not only keep them safe, but also make sure that that they are included and that they are welcomed, and also that they are directed to appropriate advice services. There's been some great work, for example, in the London Borough of Ealing to support people to reconnect to home countries, finding lost paperwork, reconnecting with family as well, which can take quite a lot of time to do and needs that soft touch kind of approach. Some people are very cautious about approaching what they perceive to be a statutory service. So we do work in partnership with the faith and community sector as well to ensure that those people are offered some kind of support.
The last one, sorry. Thank you, Chair. Lucy, you're doing the great work. Thank you. Really appreciate that. Like you said, you are trying to connect. And is there any allocated budget from, like you said, the 7 boroughs you have for, because there is a lot of families, children's included in this, they're affected. And like if you can see the figures, I'm not talking in LBHF, like all 7 boroughs. Do you have that budget allocated which could be used in this borough or to connect the families? Because at the moment they can't afford each person's government fees is £5,000 to get the further leave to remain. That's the approximate.
Yeah, so there's no specific budget for families that have no recourse. They'd be signposted to services to see if that could be obtained. There isn't funding to support that unless, of course, they are able to be supported by other pieces of legislation through children's services and adult social care. It wouldn't be something that a housing department would be able to offer. In terms of rough sleeping, there, as I say, there are, through the wider Rough Sleeping Initiative grant, there are pan-London services which have been commissioned to signpost people to the right advice. And then obviously if they become eligible, they can enter the more mainstream services. But with families, it's slightly trickier because you need to establish whether or not they're owed duties by colleagues in social care.
Thank you for amazing work.
Thank you. Councillor Miri, I believe you have some questions.
Thank you so much. Like others have said, thank you so much for all the work that you do. I know you don't need my thanks, but thank you for everything you do on the front line. But also thank you to the officers and to Councillor Umar as well for all the work you do on this. It's, to my mind, probably one of the most important things that a council and partners can do. So just want to say thank you before I go into my questions. And my question is really to do with the figures. So you mentioned there, and it's in the report, that we had the highest increase in London from 2023 to 2024. We're also the 11th highest in London overall. I think that's right. And I also noticed in the report that the figures jumped between 2022, 2023 and 2023, 2024, almost doubled. So I guess my question is, why do we have the highest figures in London? You've kind of touched on it in terms of home office accommodation and other factors, but are there other contextual factors? That also in terms of the home office accommodation, are we particularly over sort of impacted by that compared to other London boroughs? You know, I know you potentially can't go into that much detail about that, and I wouldn't want you to, but if you could ask that broad question, and then maybe some of the partners could come in on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you. No, it was, as you quite rightly say, a huge jump, which is exactly why we had the highest number of increase in rough sleeping. So not the highest number of rough sleepers in London, but that increase was significant. from the previous year, which is, so we spent some time looking into that to see if we could think of any particular reasons why that might be. And there was no sort of closure of any accommodation. There was no sort of obvious pinpoint as to where that's come from. Obviously, what happens with NAS accommodation with the Home Office, people are not then subjected to stay in the borough where they came from. So, you know, there could be people passing through that have come from outside of London even, or from different boroughs. So those single night figures, if we'd had that information, we could, I think that might be something that we would see actually, where it's people that are not long term or not necessarily sleeping here for multiple nights. They might just be here one night or two. We do have quite a big transport hub here in Hammersmith and Fulham also, which can sometimes attract people, as Dan and Hammersmith team will know. So that could be another factor, that people are just finding their way here for short term and moving on to alternative accommodation, alternative locations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think looking at your figures, sorry, Laura, looking at your figures, the vast majority of people within that increase were only ever seen once in the borough. So they weren't seen repeatedly, which may suggest they're not local, or they found an alternative option very quickly, or were passing through. So there's something about that turnover, which might not necessarily translate into something the council needs to look at in terms of longer term provision. But yeah, it was, I think the majority were what we call one night, found for one night. Would you agree with that, Dan, as well?
Yeah, so I was going to build off what they said is we are quite a major transport hub. So we've got about 5 major night bus routes through the borough. We're an end of a tube line as well, both of which we've met clients over time about, which you say, you know what, I came to London, I got off at Euston and I got on the tube and rode it to the end and they end up here. You do see that to a degree. And as Lucy said, they stay here one night, go, you know what, I don't like it here, and move over to another borough. The other thing to bear in mind with NAS is a lot of the NAS clients we get aren't from our local hotels, but come to the borough because our borough has a very strong Eritrean Sudanese community, which attracts people from hotels. So they text their friends, say, I'm sleeping here, and then we'll sleep in groups as it's safer for them to sleep in large groups. So we tend to see most of our NAS cohort to be from Eritrea and Sudan, rather than Afghanistan or India or Syria as well.
Thank you. That's really helpful. So just so I understand clearly, so you're saying that when you mention the Home Office figures, you're not saying that it's necessarily accommodation in Hammersmith and Fulham, but it's people impacted by the kind of decisions and the NAS accommodation being emptied. Is that right? Yeah.
Yeah, so we've had people come from as far as Hastings, Brighton, down to Hammersmith and Fulham, because it's where their community is and it's where their friends are who've also come over.
Yeah. Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor?
Thank you. I'm interested really in the difference between the mental health, the substance misuse and the physical health. Because you've spoken quite a lot about substance misuse, you've spoken about mental health. I didn't hear a lot about, for example, learning disabilities or other situations. Is the highest percentage, is it mental health and substance misuse?
Councillor Taylor, can I ask Dr. Lang to speak first on that?
Hi, Councillor Taylor. So we did a survey in 2020 or 2021, and 2/3 of all our clients in our 8 hostels had dual diagnosis. So it's a huge and heavy need. So that means they're mentally ill and using drugs or alcohol. That's why we have a fantastic offer from Turning Point. And we've also commissioned InReach mental health services from Central Northwest London NHS Trust. Sorry, that's a mouthful. Because we saw, Liz and Grace and I, that we had the drug and alcohol treatment there because we commissioned those services. But we didn't get a lot of traction, Stuart and Lucy, from mental health services. They're quite a stigmatized community, as you might imagine. The other thing Stuart mentioned was needing Care Act assessments. So we fund a social worker to go into all the 8 hostels, and we've discovered lots of really exciting things and pulled people out who needed to be in a nursing home. So that part. We also have great, it wasn't me, it was pre-existing Central London Community Healthcare has a big homeless health nursing team who go in, they'll assess people on the street. So where we have people with leg wounds, weeping ulcers, things like that, they get phenomenal medical care. Autism, I think we're certainly, Mungos are very aware of neurodiversity. Learning disability, they would be somewhere else, so they would not and should not be in a Mungos hostel. So that's where, as Lucy said, adult social care would kick in. This is not a factor in our clients. I would be really worried if we had a learning disability contingent there. We would get them out ASAP.
Because of course, we have the provisions of our mainstream homelessness, and where somebody has a particular vulnerability, which would include, sort of learning disability, then they would come in through the main front door, of homelessness, and potentially maybe come into, temporary accommodation, but we would be looking to help them via our mainstream sort of housing sort of service and homelessness service, not the rough sleeping service, which is a more specialist service.
Yeah, and it is common for people who are rough sleeping or have experience of rough sleeping to have other physical health issues. And as Stuart mentioned earlier, they're not necessarily engaging with any health services. So they wouldn't be going to their GP, they wouldn't be engaging with any treatment services. So when we do find them, we can pull them in if they've got support needs, when they can access that accommodation, that's nursing care, that nursing support in the accommodation. In fact, it's normally the first time they do actually engage. We've also got good, there's a good GP practice at Richford Gate, which works really well with rough sleepers and homeless people. Again, it's another place where they're welcome and can go and access that. But yeah, so that they often are there, those physical health needs, but it's not perhaps classed as the first or primary need that is sort of identified.
Thank you.
Thank you. Stuart, would you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think it highlights the level of complexity of the people support needs who we work with. I think we've got people experiencing substance use, mental health, often undiagnosed mental health issues, really complex trauma, often stemming from childhood. It's a really complex picture, and we know that having specialist services, coming in, meeting people where they're at, whether that's Thames Street meeting on the street with other partners, just Turning Point, or whether it's people coming into services, so all the services coming and meeting them there, because as we mentioned, getting to a GP appointment could be really difficult. They're hard to get, and then they've got to turn up at a certain time, and that's really difficult. Meeting traditional mental health service and things, getting to an appointment on a time, missing several appointments, and then being discharged because they're not engaging with services. And it's a real barrier to having specialist services who stick with someone, take time to build that rapport, understand the person, understand the barriers to them engaging, and then manage to get working with them. And that could be a link into their more mainstream services afterwards, but it's absolutely essential because people can't necessarily do that jump straight into traditional services.
Thank you very much. Elizabeth.
Thank you. We also work closely with the homeless health team as well. So it's a team of specialist nurses and prescribers, nurse prescribers who work in a targeted way with residents and clients on the housing and homelessness pathway. And often there's a dual approach. So we may have our clinicians from Turning Point working collaboratively with them, and also looking at how we can potentially take some of our interventions to different locations, and also exploring how we can have MDT meetings, planning meetings, joint care planned approach, and a joint risk managed approach as well. So it's really quite a targeted way in terms of how we look at the different areas and the different support needs that people may have. There's also there are also the individuals within the services that may have difficulties and diagnoses linking to all three areas in terms of physical health, learning disabilities, and substance use. And there are also certain clients who may have an undiagnosed learning disability as well due to certain childhood difficulties. And, there are some people that haven't necessarily had the best upbringing, or maybe haven't necessarily engaged in the schooling experience as is necessary. So often certain people get diagnosed at a later age. So we look at what specialist ways of working with them. We have our psychologists and our psychiatrists in place to do those initial assessments and have those initial discussions to ascertain exactly what the level of need is, and also liaising closely with the GP services as well if further diagnosis is needed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask officers another question about some of that kind of first night out? There was, and I'm not sure if it's running this year or whether it started, a kind of a roving night out. I know that there was one in my ward in St Simon's Church, and that would open up at various places around the borough as it went. I know that we talked about 100 beds at Upper Room and kind of 35 at Glassdoor. I would like to ask Upper Room and Glassdoor in particular, and possibly Thames Reach, if you think there might be a better way of signposting people to those beds, and would you just let me know if that kind of roving beds is still happening?
I wonder if that is what is the Glassdoor offer in terms of that single night, because it does rove, it's not in one necessarily fixed.
Oh, okay, perhaps I could ask Joe. Joe?
Yeah, so we call it a rotating as opposed to rotating circuit. So we have 3 circuits. So across the 3 circuits, we actually offer 105 beds every night. The 35 number that I quoted is just our circuit in Hammersmith and Fulham. But because that's a women's circuit only, many of we anticipate that many guests that may come from Hammersmith and Fulham may end up in one of our other circuits. So that's in Kensington and Chelsea and or Wandsworth. So just to be clear, it's 105 beds that we offer every night, and that increases during incidences of SWEP. Sorry, what was the actual question?
I was asking if there was a better way of signposting people to the beds that we have got.
Yeah, I mean, we do work with many referral partners. So we obviously work with members of the team at Hammersmith and Fulham, and with many of the people sitting around the table this evening. So we offer people space in our shelters. Many of the individuals that stay, many of our guests stay. Vast majority of our guests, in fact, stay for more than one night. Some of our guests will stay for the whole season. The average, I think, last year was 25 days for every guest. In terms of the referral, we have an open referral list. And essentially that ends up being sort of a waiting list. Last year we had to close that list. I think it was on 4 separate occasions because the waiting list had got so long, and we don't want our guests to wait on it or think they're sort of, we want to manage their expectations. So when the list gets to a certain length, we don't add any more names to it. But absolutely, we really want to work closely with as many partners as possible, as many referral partners as possible, and where possible, of course, we offer emergency shelter.
Thank you, Jo.
Last one, thank you. Quick one. From Peter is a very quick question, yes or no. Do you have 100 beds for only LBHF? Is that correct?
No, we don't have bed spaces. I'm not sure. We will signpost to Glassdoor, and even this evening at the meal service, I was talking to a few of our beneficiaries about the service, but we don't actually have bed spaces.
Thank you for the clarification. My main question is, like, where we are supporting the great service, like health issues, mental health issues, living, house, and NHS supports, foods. Like Dan said, there is a multicultural people all here, like he said, Sudanese, Eritreans, Afghanis, Indians he mentioned. Do you come across any language barrier issues with the rough sleepers? If yes, then how many different languages services available, or do we have any leaflet service provider or guidance in multiple languages or not?
So I'm placed to answer that. In terms of lots of leaflets we give out, we tend to carry our languages in, I think, the 8 most common rough sleeping languages, which do include stuff like Tigrinya, Arabic, Romanian, Italian. So we do have, and we also use Language Line to translate on site. And in our organization, Thames Reach, we have a database of translators. So if someone in our organization speaks Hindi, for example, we had this recently, we called them and they come out on shift with us and translate in person if needed. So we do have quite a lot of resources around language and language barriers.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ume, it's a very kind of complex area of your portfolio. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Chair. So, hello, everyone. I'm Councillor Frances Ume, the Cabinet Member for Housing and Homelessness. I really appreciate the discussion this evening. I think we can all agree that it's pretty shocking to see the rise in rough sleeping across London, across the UK. I think it was the combined homelessness and information network that was reporting an increase of a fifth in terms of rough sleeping across London. It is encouraging to see the increased funding that's been allocated, the £2.7 million that's been announced in recent days. Also encouraging to see the MP's inquiry into rough sleeping to identify the root causes, to create longer term solutions, which I think is really important. But meanwhile, the continued work in partnership with all the charitable organisations and partners that are at this table today is incredibly helpful. Very, very grateful to you all. I think our Rough Sleeping Commission, the resident-led independent commission, many years ago that informed the housing strategy and the rough sleeping and homelessness strategy today, was very insightful and helped provide understanding around some of those root causes, which is really useful and helped to develop in partnership with all the partners around the table an approach to tackling rough sleeping. And there is a way to go, definitely, but it's really encouraging to see the work so far and the continued work to tackle the complexity of rough sleeping in the borough. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm cognizant that we're at the end of our time for this segment. I'm aware that we have some partners and we have some residents here. And I just wonder if anybody had any kind of quick questions that they'd like to ask. Mr. Reeves, would you, can we get Mr. Reeves a microphone, please? It's for the TV cameras.
I was quite amazed to see how many different organisations, charities, work on this issue in this borough. And so I've got 2 questions related to that. Where do you get your money from, funding? And 2, is there a formal coordination? Otherwise, people can fall through the loops. Is there a core organisation structure? And wouldn't it be better to just have one organisation providing all these services? Borough. And would there be cost advantages of that and better coordination and better services all to the rough sleepers?
Thank you for your question, Mr. Reeves. Laura, would you answer that first, and then I'll come to you, Michael. Thank you.
I can jump in here. So one of the main ways that our rough sleeping services are funded is via grant funding. There's grant funding called Rough Sleeper Initiative, RSI, we fondly call it in the business. And the way that works is that the government invite local authorities to bid for funds, but on the basis of need. And they ask us to pull together bids with our partners, because no one of us in this room has all the knowledge. We are working best in the sum of our parts. And that kind of feeds in a little bit into the second part of your question, really, because I hope what we've been able to understand this evening is that we work, we are all individuals. The people that approach us for assistance and for services are individuals. And what's really important is that we take time to understand people as individuals, and people don't all have the same needs. And so it's quite difficult to work just with one. I think if we worked with one agency, we would be in danger of not being able to respond to the range and the individual needs of the people that come to us. And so the funding is largely from government, not exclusively, but largely from government. And it's on the basis of us making the argument for it. And we make the argument for it with our partners who have the intelligence and can provide us with the information to help us build a picture of what the needs of the individuals in Hammersmith and Fulham are. So it comes from, so the Housing Services Department is the Ministry, is the MHCLG. So we have the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government. Yeah, so our RSI funding comes from our government department, and then there's the Greater London Authority, which again is grant fund, government grant funded, but a slightly different area of the government, and they also have programs that we can bid for, but it's about going for that money and representing our residents' best interests in the best way that we can to argue for resources.
Thank you. We also do benefit from grants from our public health and NHS, who can help fund some of these in-reach services that we can get. And I'm sure organisations here have other funding streams as well that you're pulling on.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you for your question. So the first question was about the funding, and so our organisation gets about 30% of our funding from Hammersmith and Fulham Council. Thank you, through the Third Sector Investment Fund and some other grants. And then we have a whole range of different ways of bringing in income. So we would apply to trusts and foundations such as the National Lottery, City Bridge, some of those trusts that you may know of. That funding has been more difficult to get over the last few years because of the cost of living, and they've seen a 5-fold increase in applications. So work that they would have funded is now not being funded because they can't manage the volume of applications. So we also get money from individual donors, but I think the key thing for us and some of the other charities perhaps too is that we are working much more closely with corporate companies. So lots of companies in the borough who are supporting us. Chelsea Football Club are now working with us and launched an appeal last week. So they're just one of about 11 different corporates. In terms of the second bit about would it be better if it was one organisation, I kind of think not, because I have a choice. If I want to buy carrots, to go to Marks and Spencer's, Aldi, Asda, Lidl, wherever, Waitrose, and I can make that choice for the service or store that suits what I would like to buy and where I want to buy it from. And whilst all of these people here are friends and we all work very closely together, we work differently. We have different approaches. And so that suits the different people that we see.
Thank you. That's a really lovely note to end that on. Thanks, Mr. Reid. So thank you all for coming along this evening and giving us all this time to kind of talk through what you do. It's been really useful, it's been really educational, and it's been quite inspiring. So thank you very much. We're going to take a 5-minute break and then come back with our kind of our last piece for the evening. Thank you. Okay. Hi, can we start again, please? John? I can. John? Thanks for coming. Debbie, we do need to start again.
Yeah. Can we all come back to the table, please?
Okay, we're ready to go. I think we've got everybody that we need, apart from Councillor Sadiq and Councillor Ume. And Councillor Sadiq's coming back. Okay, should we start? Should we start again? Thank you. Are we live again?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Can I just ask members, do members agree to note the report that we've just seen? Lovely. Thank you very much. So our next item is the voids update, and it's going to be joined by presented by Richard Shrey and John Hayden.
Second conversation. We can't hear the first.
Thank you, Councillor Alford. Richard, John, would you like to present your report?
I will. Thank you very much. So I'll try and go through it quickly because I know it's been a long evening for everybody. So over the past year, we're gone from 395 voids back down to 151. In short, is the highlights, and we get, you know, on that journey we get 5 new voids a week. So that means the service is now delivered and put back into the stock over 450 properties. We're now down to the smaller numbers, which are 91 what we call minor voids, which are 20 to 40 days. And then we've got some 60 voids that are complicated ones. So these are structural works. These are ones that have had maybe fires that are in tower blocks that we have to scaffold up around the tower blocks to actually reinstate and complete. And that's why we have that distinction. So when you see that table there, complex works 15, they are structural, that we're rebuilding, you know, redoing foundations, et cetera, So the target is to, from a calculated stock of about 13,500, we should probably have about 60 voids at any given time in a business as usual position for people, internal transfers, moving on, and whatnot. And we are aiming for that target to be back for the 31st of December. So the positive is that we've taken the age profile, because some of the voids were years old because of different reasons. So now we probably don't have any void that's over 90 plus days, which is really good. And then the rental income is now back in kilter. So we had a rental loss target of $1.5 million per annum. We're running at about 950 now. So we're 600K under the projection of the rental losses from the works we've done on some of the properties. That rental loss will continue, because if you look at the 60 properties that are there, you know, Norland House has 4 homes where we're scaffolding up 18 floors to reinstate 4 properties. So there's going to be some time lag before they come back in. But I reckon by about June 2025, we will be running in that 60 business as usual, and we will have less than 40 days of rental loss at any given time on the voids. So that's moved to a really positive position. The voids process was audited before I arrived in January 2023. And I concluded the audit with the auditors in August, September of that year. What I've done is by the time the recommendation report came out, everything that was recommended was actually in place. So the keys, the systems, how we operate and that. And as a consequence of that, I've invited the auditor to come back in November, December, because we love an audit right now. And hopefully then we will get that back in kilter. So the key and the management of the voids is where it needs to be. The rental income's good, the works are good. We audit the quality of the works with residents. So we bring them through the post inspections. And now we're going to move into some different area with homes, with sheltered homes, with more dementia-friendly systems going in place, doing more enhanced works, decoration, carpeting, and smart working, and also maybe the retrofit in the future. Now we're in a settled space. So all in all, without going on about it, the voids are in a particularly good place now. We've got a bit of work to do, but as I said, by the end of June of next year, the rental issue will help with the HRAs under recovery. We'll be back in a good space there, and yeah, it's working.
Thank you very much. Richard, would you like to add anything?
I'd just like to say that I think the team have done a really great job. I think, as I said, I arrived where the voids numbers were going up rather than down. And I think the other thing is that what we've learned from it is that it's important about focusing on getting our residents back into those voids, what the team have been focused on. We also learned about reducing silo management. You know, John and I found out that we had 4 people having a key. Well, you know, what's that about? You know, you have one section of the service holding the key, passing on to another service, taking days to get things sorted out. We have removed that type of baggage and also focused what we need to do there. I think the other thing what we've done is that we've talked about major and also minor voids. Previously, I believe that people were just talking about the minor voids. We didn't explain about the major voids. I think that's turned it around. And also, we also work with our capital team to understand the void management as well. So it's a proper together approach, one team aspect. So this report talks about voids across housing, not in the individual sections.
So thank you for the report. Can I ask for a clarification? Where we've spoken about voids before, there have been sort of 2 levels of finishing off voids. There's been a level where they've been ready for families to move into, for residents to move into. And there's been a level where they've been used more for temporary accommodation. And we've spoken before about how the standards have been much lower if they've been used for temporary accommodation. Why was that? And has that situation now ended?
So there's 2 different types of voids. So the temporary accommodation team, when they talk about voids, they talk about properties that's not our stock. So that could be Peabody or Guinness Trust in Borough, or you're talking properties that we might have in Harrow and that. So they're the type of stock that we get given when the TA is trying to find suitable accommodation to get people out of bed and breakfast and annexes. So they come in variable conditions. They should meet the decent home standards. So that's the requirement of any landlord is to provide a home that meets a decent home standard fit for habitation. So they should have those requirements, but you get varying levels of completion where some will decorate, some won't decorate, some will have flooring, some will expect you to put flooring in. So that's the problem, is that when we're looking externally to TA, particularly around some of the stuff Claire and the team talked about in terms of moving people from a homeless front door position into hotels, short stint, and then getting them into a suitable location whilst we try and find them alternative accommodation, they won't necessarily have a duty to be housed in our properties, and therefore we will put them into voids, which are temporary accommodation voids, which are very different. Our properties will all meet the decent home standards. So no property that we let in the viewings process, they may view the property 2 weeks before it's finished if we deem it safe in terms of trying to increase the key time, but all our homes meet the decent homes fit for habitat compliance.
Thank you very much. I'm going back a couple of years to conversations about voids where I think they had been used when they weren't quite ready. But that's great to hear you saying that. Members, do you have questions? Councillor Murray?
Thanks so much. I've got a simple question first, which is that are the works carried out by the DLO or by private contractors? Is the first question.
So they're by our term contractors. Our DLO don't do void works.
Okay, thank you so much. And then I wonder, what is the impact on this on under-occupying? So let's say someone has been living in a 4-bed council house on their own. They unfortunately pass away. And that becomes a void, and then it gets repaired, and then another a family can move in. What impact is that having on the sort of under-occupying rate? And yeah.
So I'll have to follow up with that with actual numbers, because that's a really good question. Inside the TA team, which myself and Claire have been looking at, we're doing a piece of work now on over-occupation, which is a slightly different thing. And we do have homes where we've got 2 or 3 people in 3-4 bedroom properties, where we have opportunity to incentivize them to move into some of our newer voids or some of our newer properties. So that piece of work we started about 6 weeks ago, and looking at options to, pay it's £1,000 incentive per room, whether that's enough or not, what we can do. An option, maybe some of the independent living is an option for people that want to move there as well. So we're looking at that in terms of trying to provide more stock in terms of the housing register, people on bid for homes, and that TA impact. What was the other question you asked me at the start? Okay, I'm glad I tried to answer that.
Thank you. Councillor Orford.
Was it 90 days was the longest you had of voids?
So over 90 days. So
How many have you got over 90 days?
So 60. We got 45 that are fire damage insurance claims, which are on the major ones. We have 15, which are structural damages, and the remaining, whatever it was, 891 are within 60 days.
So, but you have got some that are still very long-term voids.
But you can't turn them over. I mean, we're talking gable end walls, we're talking structural underpinning, we're talking soil movements and that down, particularly in some of the estates. So they're never going to be in the key of a minor void. They're always going to move into the major void category, and significant money to return them back into occupation.
Thank you. Councillor Sadiq.
Maybe my question is not relevant, but it's only for the information purpose. A lot of properties within the borough, we have private landlords, and nobody's living for years and years there. And they just put the sales board outside is under sale, or they put online to selling. But actually there's from years and years, there's no offers selling, nobody's living over there, and the closed properties. How we can use for them, or what we can do for them, which category under they come, or what is the council can think about them?
So the council will have an acquisition policy, which should sit inside asset strategy, and they look at opportunities for purchasing. We also, inside the temporary accommodation team, have a procurement team. So that procurement team is looking for supply, because even though we have people in temporary accommodation, we have leases that run out, leases that we have to move people across it. They look for opportunities for purchasing of properties, particularly when we get GLA funding in borough. So we look at that stock and what's on the market, and we look at the rents and the assessment of it. And if it's a viable option, they will purchase properties, which is something that Richard's been looking at pretty recently. So we are reviewing that, and if it's a viable property that we could buy and manage in our archetype, we would purchase it.
Do you know what sort of number we have this type of properties in the borough, or no idea?
So I can get you a profile of what we're looking at. I could follow it up as a follow-up from today, but I don't have that to hand now.
Thank you, John. Thank you, Councillor Sadiq. Councillor Murray.
You mentioned that sometimes people are shown a void property like 2 weeks before it's complete. And I can think of just a couple of cases where residents may have gone through that process and have been quite, that maybe they've been confused about that, or they've thought that the council's going to put them in a kind of work in progress property. So is there anything we can do just to make it absolutely clear that you will not move into this property until it's complete? And actually, is there like a sliding scale? Like if some of the more significant works they'll be finished before you move in, but maybe like cupboards or something, won't, you know, or is it absolute or is it a sliding scale?
So it tends to be just decorative finishing. So you know, I'd be disappointed. I'm sure it does happen if people believe that it's the condition we're moving them back into, because we obviously do sign up packs. I think one of the gaps which our councillor Umay did identify as well was that the period between the viewings and the sign-ups, you know, there's a gap where somebody could have a property under condition and then 2 weeks later decide not to take the property and then somebody else loses out. So we're looking at the information for what we can have there for viewings, what the home looks like before you go into the home, making sure those packs are online, and also, you know, being a bit clearer about the expectation of what the home gets. But don't tend to get a lot of negativity around it, although it does happen. And what we've introduced just off the back of that is surveys 6 weeks after somebody's occupied the property. So to go back in to make sure that, you know, cookers are connected, that they need help with their washing machines or, you know, their responsibility, and to see, you know, what their feedback is. Because everybody's happy when they get a new home. What I'm interested in is 6 weeks or 3 months down the line, just to see, you know, what actually is happening in the property. So we've moved into that space, but it's a good point and we are looking at it.
Chair, if you,
Yeah, Richard.
yeah, all I was also going to say is that what we also done is that we've moved away from Excel spreadsheets. We've now got NEC systems which report live information, so we can actually understand what's actually there, and the team actually work on a weekly basis to analyse that. And it's not just John's team. We speak to allocations, we speak into housing management. There's a proper team who are working together on making sure that we get our residents back into those properties.
Thank you very much. Councillor Umay, it seems quite a sort of an improvement in services.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I suppose much like the rough sleeping update that we just had, this is definitely a team working piece that requires so many different parts of the housing service to be working in partnership to ensure that we're returning empty homes, let's be honest, back into the service. So individuals, families have a place that they can call home for themselves. And I think a really important part of this process, has been highlighted by Richard, has been that classification around the different voids and then being able to target the work needed for them. So classifying them as minor, major, capital works that are required, and then targeting the different contractors, as John was saying, to really get into those homes and to turn them around as quickly as possible. I think that streamlining of the process, you know, from when the key is handed over from the tenant to when it's handed over to a new resident to occupy has been really important, and looking at the ways in which the teams can work closer together there has been essential. And the audits is fundamental to this process. You know, coming in, recognizing that work needed, speaking with Richard, speaking with John, working out a way in which we can understand the different parts of that journey and tackling those various elements to make them a lot more efficient. And there is still more work to be done, and the team has been working incredibly hard to make sure we reduce the number of empty homes that we have and bring them back into the service while maintaining certain elements so we can provide those for various reasons. But yeah, my thanks to the team for all the work that they put into this.
Thank you. And it has been a point of real frustration for residents when there aren't enough properties and they see one that's just on the street that's been empty for a year. And that was the situation we were in. So thank you.
Chair, can I just add one more point, just
Yeah,
to agree with you on that? And I think Councillor Miri, you had raised the point around the decent home standard. And I think, as John was sort of saying, it's been really crucial having residents as part of the forums that we have that have been able to visit, comment, feed into, you know, that process, see what the properties look like, and then provide that feedback to the team to ensure we are continuing to meet that standard, but also providing that resident lens with regards to things that might come up, questions that might be had, so that can then feed into the communications process during, you know, the voids management, so people are clear and the expectations are clear. So I think there is still more work to be done with regards to improving that communication, as you've highlighted some cases there, but certainly that has also been a useful part of the process.
Thank you. Kind of talking about sort of residents' involvement, we have 3 residents here. I think Mr. Thurloway, good evening, welcome back, in fact. Ms. Thomas, is it? And Mr. Reeves, would either of you, any of you like to ask a question of officers or even the cabinet member? Mr. Thurloway, lovely. Mr. Thurloway, give us one moment. We need to get a microphone to you.
are they the ones that are being floated as being sold off to some peculiar housing company that was mentioned in the cabinet report last week? Are they completely different
No.
things? They're not, right? Right. Which ones are they?
Well, these ones which we've got, and like what John said, they are extremely complex to fix,
For
and
whatever
that's what we
reason.
are undertaking. So it's nothing anything about that. The housing company is a different way of working, and that is not about void management.
Oh, the report mentioned voids.
So they won't have HRA voids. Our stock is HRA voids, which is stock for residents and tenants. They might buy private homes or different homes that doesn't sit currently in our portfolio, but our stock won't transfer into a housing company.
Oh, right.
So
Okay,
yeah,
so
if I may
that's-
add, it's looking at those properties, as John was saying and Richard was saying, that are across the borough that the council may acquire under the housing company that can then be used for individuals to rent. So they will not be part of the social housing stock that the council owns.
Thank you very much. Mr. Soloway,
That's it, that's all.
that's it. Thank you very much. And Ms. Thomas, do you have a question? Sorry, Ms. Thomas, I need to ask you to come to a microphone as well, or they can't hear you at home.
Are the voids street properties or flats?
John?
Sorry, Marie, what's the question?
Most of the voids street property or flat?
Not necessarily. If you were to ask me, I would say, and I'm just making an educated guess from what I see, I would say they were multi-occupied buildings. They wouldn't be street properties as such. So I'd say the majority of the ones I get, which are one beds or studios, tend to be flats.
Observation in Hammersmith and Fulham for the past 40-odd years. Most of the problems we've had are street properties. So that's my issue. Yeah.
And the complex cases that we talk about would all be, I mean, the majority of the ones, other than ones on terrace street properties where we get complicated repairs, roofing issues, structural issues, subsidence. So that we tend to get that in street properties. We don't get it in tower rise or high rises.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions or comments from members? Oh, Mr. Reeves.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple of points. It'd be very interesting to compare the voids in council properties, or the numbers of them, or to compare to the housing association stock and the private sector renting stock. I don't suppose, you got those stats, but it'd be very, very interesting to see, because then you can refute the allegation that there's more voids in council housing than in
There is some housemark data that's out there which we benchmark against. I mean, we're going to be in, upper quartile of voids holding. Nobody will hold more than, depending on your stock, we should have 60 voids where we've got 100 and something now. So we're 40 off where we would be benchmarked against every other local authority. I mean, there is no real measurement because people don't publish their number of empty properties, particularly in private housing associations.
Now, when does an empty home become a void?
As soon as somebody notifies us that they're ending the tenancy.
What happens if they're in the process of leaving and leave the place empty?
Well,
and they're not coming back.
So as soon as they end the tenancy and they give us the 4 weeks notification, it becomes a void.
So they've got to contact the council.
So they have to give notice to terminate the
And
tenancy.
what happens if they don't?
Well, if it's tenancy fraud, it's a different thing. If people have left and we'll rent arrears, we'll end up being notified that somebody's not in a property because it's only occupied. So we'd have to go through a legal process.
And they're not voids, right?
Yeah, so we'd have to go through a process to recover them.
I live on Meadowbank Close shelter houses scheme, And the tenants in our coffee morning last week reported there were a number of empty flats there. And I said, well, work is probably being done. No, nobody's seen any work being done.
Not following the question, sir.
I live on the Meadowbank Close,
yeah.
sheltered housing scheme. The tenants reported at we have a monthly coffee morning with the tenants reps there, and they reported there's several empty flats there.
Okay. I'm not aware of the specifics of the void.
No, you wouldn't be.
But I'll look into it.
And I see that there's no work being done there. Now, that's an isolated instance. Is that a common thing?
No. If we have a void, we'd be working on it. So that I don't.
Well, as soon as you know the property is empty, I think part of the problem is empty because the tenant, unfortunately, has reached a stage or they've gone into a nursing home and they are in between.
I think we're asking maybe the wrong person here. John Hayden is the Assistant Director of Repairs, and I think that might be more of a Richard Sway question. So if we could, would you mind just turning your microphone off so that you don't get...
Yes, how do I do that?
So, Chair, what we'll look into, we'll speak to the sheltered housing manager tomorrow, and we'll review those units and get you back. If there are units which are not being have become voids, we will let you know about it. And if they are voids, John's team will get working on it and getting back into circulation.
Just to come back in on that, so if we have scheme managers there, we check in with properties. So if the property was empty, we would know that the property wasn't being occupied. If a resident was moved out for medical needs, we wouldn't necessarily take possession of that property and treat it as a void. So somebody could be in Paddington, getting treatment, and that means that they're not there for a period of time. So our scheme managers report back in every day. So it's very unlikely in our sheltered accommodation that we would have an empty property that we weren't aware of because we check in with their home. So, yeah.
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing that report to us this evening. Members, do you agree to note the report?
Agreed.
Lovely, thank you very much. And so item 6 on our agenda, date of future meetings. Could members please note the dates 27th of January and the 23rd of April, 2025. We will be looking at the HRA for 25-26 at the meetings. And I'm minded that it would be useful to bring in a compliance update. Are there any other items that members would like to see on the agenda for next year?
When are we discussing the rents?
Well, we'll be doing budgets in the HRA, so that would be a part of that. So proposing at the next meeting in January, the next meeting, we'll bring the HRA in, Councillor Orford. All right, lovely. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for your time, and thank you for anybody watching at home, and safe home. Thank you.